Welcome to the Creative Mind podcast, a podcast by Maike Döling and Jeff Holman. And it's already our third episode, and I hope you are enjoying it so far. This time we have a slightly different topic for you, which is the story of Jeff's journey into the acting world. A story about a boy from Talladega, Alabama, on his way to Hollywood.
La 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 la, bling, and we start.
Even if it feels weird,
Yeah.
I think we are going somewhere with this.
Yeah, you sure? No. We can try. We'll get on that ladder and see if we fall.
No, I just also want it's not only for me, it's also for the listeners that I want them to know, who are you? Where are you from?
Oh, gosh. I'm still figuring that out. So we
Okay, I know that's a big question.
And I do like portraying characters. I guess, maybe that's part of it. So we're all portraying. Anyway.
Start from the beginning. I mean, I know that you have not always been an actor and a painter and whatever you are, but how did everything start with your creative path?
Well, if I'm honest, I did start that way. That's the thing. Mm-hmm. When I was a kid, and this is so strange, and I've thought about this over the last year a lot more, and refined it. The first real memory I have of existing, like a vivid memory you have of a place, of a time, of a moment, was with my mom, who was attending an artist workshop. And I was a kid. I don't even know how old I was, but I remember being there with her. And I remember being around all these painters and these creators. And I think I had to be there because she didn't have anybody to watch me. And that is my first vivid memory of this reality. And since my mother's passing and everything that's kind of aligned since then and has been aligning my entire life, it's such a beautiful first memory to have, considering where my life is now. And then following that, I remember from like 9-10 years old, I lived in one of these small towns in rural United States of America, and where every little town had a square. You have a square with the courthouses and the streets around it and the schools. And I come from that kind of town. So in my neighborhood, just like you see in all the movies, we had a pack of friends. It's like a group of friends who did all this, your typical bike rides and all these backyard football and all these things. Anyway, I remember also, for whatever reason, I really loved movies. Like, I was really captivated by films. So much so, another funny memory that I have, when I was about, I think I was 4 or 5, I don't remember. I watched Superman, the original, the Christopher Reeve Superman, for the first time. And my mother had bought me Superman pajamas. Mm-hmm. So right after watching the movie, I was so inspired to be Superman. So I put on my Superman pajamas, and I went to my bunk beds. My brother and I we had a room in the back beds, and I went to the back room to the bunk beds, and I climbed to the top in my Superman pajamas. And I was like, I can fly. I just know it. So I dove headfirst into the toy box. I started screaming. My mother came in the room and she said all she saw was just blood, just all over my face, streaming down. And I have a scar right here. I don't know if you can really see it, but I have a really prominent gash right there from this moment. I hit a toy and it hit me right there, and it cut and it just bled everywhere. That was another. That's another one of my memories from being inspired from storytelling. And the other thing that I would do, and my mother and I have all these. I brought them all from the States with me. Eventually, I want to get them digitalized, I guess. But I used to get all my friends in the neighborhood together, and I used to reenact movies with them. I used to reenact stories, everything from like Little Riding Hood to Platoon or whatever was out at that time. And I always remember that my mom was so involved. She would always be the camera operator in the 1980s, a big camera she would hold over to the side. And I would always get her to be the camera person, and I would direct everybody and also simultaneously do all the parts that nobody wanted to do. So if we didn't have any females, which again were a group of young boys, so it was like a pack of boys mostly, I would do the female parts because nobody else wanted to do them. So I played Little Red Riding Hood in a story of Little Red Riding Hood. But I would do this as a kid. So if I were to say I didn't start with this, I guess that I did start like that. I guess this was my beginning. I just lost a connection somewhere when, again, I'm from a very small town. We didn't have, in our schools, we didn't have drama classes. We didn't have art classes. We didn't have these things. So we had sports. It was sports, and it was marching band, like orchestra kind of stuff. And I did both. I played soccer. I played basketball. I played baseball. I really wanted to play American football. My mother would never let me because I was too small. But I simultaneously played the trumpet in the band. So yeah, I was kind of like a mixed breed. We're talking about mixed breeds. I've always been some sort of a mixed breed. But I lost my connection with, I guess you would say, the arts, because as I got into middle school, it wasn't a place that kind of nurtured these things. And the nurturement was always my mother creatively, but also, you get to a certain point in childhood and where you start, again, as I also told you, I'm a rebel. So I was like, oh, well, I don't want to be that way. Well, my mom does. It was like, I always was stretching myself to try new things and do new things. So I pulled myself away from, I guess, what I naturally loved.
Because you were a rebel.
I guess so.
Yeah, could be. Yeah, it makes sense.
I guess so.
So where did it go then from high school? What?
Well, as I also told you, I wasn't very good in school, and I'll be honest with you, I even thought myself, I was like, well, maybe I'm just not very smart. Maybe I'm just, it's just not in my cards, because I saw other people excelling in certain things, and I just couldn't. I think I always knew what it really was, but maybe I just wasn't ready to face that. And I always took what everybody told me, and then people would. Then I would take certain tests, and they would suggest that I had some kind of learning disability. And this pretty much came from my brother, who was younger than me, who did have a severe learning disability. He's very severely dyslexic. And even I discovered later in life that I'm slightly dyslexic, but not in a way where it's severe, where my letters get jumbled. It's more like when I read, I will, for whatever reason, my brain will throw a word in front of a word, and I'll literally read it backwards and not know where I realize I'm doing it. And but my brother has it far more severe than I. But because of his disabilities, and they look at my lack of achievements in the academic world of Alabama, they started considering, well, he's got a learning disability too. But what I started noticing especially toward the last couple of years in my schooling, is that whenever I would become intrigued in a subject, I'd excel in it without question. I would just, and boom, there it was. If I didn't give a fuck, I didn't do it. I didn't care. If it didn't intrigue me, And that's what I was really scared to face. And like, am I just lazy? You know, and like if it doesn't capture my attention, I just give it nothing. And really that was it. And the reason I'm explaining this is because there weren't any art classes. There weren't any drama classes. And the music was cool to an extent. One of my favorite parts of being in the band was doing like the Christmas orchestra, whatever shows. And it just being very magical when it all comes together musically, but I didn't enjoy playing the trumpet. It was not something that I ever really embraced. So I was always like toward the end, you got first trumpet, second trumpet, third trumpet. I was always in the third trumpet range, just primarily because I just didn't put a lot of energy into it. I could do it, but that was about it, So I think what it was, and I'm not blaming, because I really do. I appreciate the journey that I've went on with this. But I was never really introduced to or come across anything that truly sparked my interest in a way that I would focus and have the discipline for it. I was never a person, maybe it's the rebel in me, but I didn't like being forced to do something. Well, I know you don't like it, but you've got to do it. I just don't, it can't break that barrier. Even to this day, I still can't break that barrier. And it was a little bit relieving to find out that I wasn't mentally challenged. It was a little bit relieving because I kind of embraced it. I was like, okay, that makes sense. I have a learning disability because I just can't do this stuff. And it was always funny when it always got down to a point where they would say, okay, well, we're going to hold you back a year because you're just not going to pass this. I'd be like, oh, fine. And then they're like, why haven't you been doing this all year? And I'm like, I don't know. I just like, it's weird. But what I'm trying to say is I lost connection. The reason it got disconnected is because there was just, I don't know. I liked sports, but it was also something that I liked and enjoyed. Very competitive, but it wasn't it, And so then after high school, which I did get through, I never was held back other than kindergarten. My mother held my brother and I both back just because she was a teacher or teacher's aide. She thought that was for the best. But anyway, I got through all the grades. And of course, all my friends were going off to colleges and going off these things. And I suddenly had like this panic attack of like, oh God, maybe I should have like tried harder so I can go to these places and the things you're talking about, the things they have at these schools. I'm like, gosh, like that sounds wow. And my parents were like, you just squeezed out of high school. We are not about to invest in you going to no college. I'm like, okay, fair point. So it was kind of always in line for me to take over my father's business, which was a tire shop, like tires for cars and brake work and hard labor and big tractor tires. We get breakdown with big tools. And it was my grandfather's business before him, my mother's father, not my dad's father. So it was like just kind of in my cards, just to, work hard 5-6 days a week and make ends meet. And I did that until I was almost 30 years old, and something happened. It just,
what happened?
I knew that was coming. I was like, and now she wants to know what happened. Boy, it's like, so I live in Talladega, Alabama, which a lot of people know Alabama because Sweet Home Alabama, but not many people can pick it out on a map, understandably so. And a lot of people in the States, possibly other places, know Talladega. Well, for two reasons now. But for the first reason was always that we had NASCAR, those cars that race each other around the track. And I was really into it for a while. But we have one of the largest, fastest tracks in the world in my little city. And that's what we're known for, the Talladega Super Speedway. I went through a phase in my life, too, that I wanted to be a race car driver. I was always searching for something to latch onto. So when I was, how old was I? What year was this exactly? I think it was somewhere around 2005, 2004. I was working at my father's shop, and I was also bartending on the weekends just because I wanted a little extra money. Because again, working your ass off, hard labor every day, getting paid on Friday and being broke on Monday sucked, and that's just kind of what it was. And that was my life. And that was like, oh God, what am I going to have to do to get out of this? So I started bartending, and which was a town over, like an hour from where I lived. So while I was bartending in the Anniston Star, which is the town was called Anniston, which is a little bit bigger city than Talladega, I would always read the paper there for whatever reason, because I was bored, because I went out an open shift. But I read in the paper that they were casting for extras for a big production that was happening in Alabama, in Talladega. I was like, ooh, what is this? We're making a movie about NASCAR. And it's a comedy with Will Ferrell. And they're going to call it Talladega Nights. I was like, oh, that's cool. So I read that they're doing a casting call, which now, it's one of those mass casting calls where they just bring in hundreds and hundreds of people. And you got to think, like, they're trying to fill stands so they were bringing in lots of people, but they were doing interviews in Birmingham, Alabama. And I told my boss, I was like, I'm going to take Saturday off because I think I want to drive to Birmingham and just see what happens. And they were like, you have to bring a headshot. I'm like, what's a headshot? I had no idea what a headshot was. It's like a photo of your face. I brought a Polaroid. I didn't know what I was doing. I brought a Polaroid. I was like, okay, here's a picture of my face. Okay. So I took that with me, and I went to this casting call that was happening at this church. It was a really big church. And there was just a sea of people. Just so many people. It's like a cattle call. They'd stick these numbers on you. I think I was 300 and something. And they would just march you through like a production line and ask you questions and see your headshot. But for me, that was still a very interesting process. It was a little weird for me. I was like, I just felt like I went through like a meat production or something. I don't know. But I really forgotten about it. I did it and I forgot about it. And I was on shift it was another Saturday actually, at the bar, and I just opened the bar and I got a weird phone call from the area code of Birmingham. And I didn't answer the first one because it's like, okay, this is, you get a lot of random calls. And it called again. I was like, all right, let me see who this is. So I answered it, and there was a person on the line. Is this Jeffrey Hallman? And yeah, I was like, hi, we are with casting something. I was like, oh, Hollywood. Calling me. And so, and they were like, you have been chosen to be one of our extras in the movie. I was like, yeah, cool. Are you available? Blah, blah, blah. I was like, yeah. I was like, you've been specifically chosen for potentially being more featured. I didn't know what the hell that was. But I was like, can you come back for blah, blah, blah? And I was like, yes, ma'am. I can be there. Yes, ma'am. And so I went back for another call, and I didn't know. They didn't give us a lot of information, as they don't. I know that now, but they didn't. We were just kind of there again. But I know it was a lot, not so many people. Anyway, to speed the story up, I got chosen to be in one of the pit crew teams, which is the crew that work on specific cars of one of the characters in the movie. And they were European, actually. This was Sacha Cohen-Baron, who was playing Jean Girard, who was a NASCAR driver that come from over from Europe, I think, from the whatever y'all do here in the racing world. But I was chosen to be European, funny enough, because I looked somewhat European, and I guess I looked French because he had a French team. So anyway, so not only did I end up getting to, I went to for the first time I went to, everything was just like, I kind of going to describe it as Charlie going to the chocolate factory for the first time, just in awe, just absolutely like they brought me in, they measured me, I tried on these costumes, and I was just like, I was just a kid again. I was just like, yeah, and everything was just so absolutely magical. And I remember being on set and literally like, because there were hundreds of extras, but they were all in the stands. But somewhat, I was chosen to be in this little small group, and I was with Sacha Cohen, which I'd never heard of before. And I'll never forget. He came up to me. He was messing with my ears, and he was doing his French accent, and I didn't know who this dude was. I didn't have a clue who this dude was. He creeped me out in a way, if I'm honest with you. But I figured out that's kind of his personality later. But I was just absolutely fixated that, again, the process, watching it being made, watching the directors, watching the actors, watching the mechanics of it, watching it come together. And I was just, and I remember being on there one specific day and watching the director play with the actors and all these people involved. And, and I was like, I don't care what I have to do, but I have to be in this world. I have to I don't even know where I'm a bartender and I work at an automotive shop in Alabama. I don't know what I have to go, but I have to do this. This is it. I went kind of full circle, but I felt like a kid, directing all my childhood friends with my mother as the camera operator. And I was like, this is real. You can do this. These are just humans just like I am. I can do this. And then, oh God, how many hours do we have? Because this is where the real long journey began. This is where but this is the moment that I discovered and I saw it and I somehow found myself, it came to me. It literally came to me and presented itself and stuck me inside it and shook up the globe. And I was like, okay, this is it. This is what I want.
What was this moment, this feeling? What was this feeling of, I have to do this? What kind of feeling is that, or was that?
I really, honestly, if I'm not going to try to pretend that I can describe it. I want to, and I just know that I think there have only been a few times that I've had this overwhelming signal, just like a signal went off, like an alarm went off in my body. Something like this. It was just it could not have been more of a sign in my face. It's just like universe just really getting in my mouth. Here, idiot, look, this is it. And I'm like, okay, I get you. But it was also quite I won't say terrifying, but somewhat quite scary because I didn't have a clue where to even start. Of course, my friends and my family thought I was already a Hollywood actor because I was an extra. Thankfully, intuitively, I knew that was the furthest from the truth.
But what did you do then? You quit your job, or you told your father, I'm not going to take over your business? Or
no, it didn't happen that fast. I kind of had to process it. After it was over, I had to I think it took several months to kind of process what I just experienced and how it completely changed the way I perceived what I could actually do in life. Well, it was hope. It was hope. I had some kind of hope just overwhelm me, and I really needed to sit in that. So I started tinkering around with ways, and YouTube wasn't a big thing back then. There was not a lot of online access, I would say, to really understand what I should do next. So the only thing that I really knew to do, or I had an idea to do it, was to get on Craigslist of all places. When that, before I think it returned with whatever the hell it is now, and looking for ads for student film auditions. And again, in Birmingham, Alabama, we had the University of Alabama in Birmingham, and they had a film department. And I remember going to they had an open call audition for, one of the roles. And again, I did not know what I was doing. And so I wrote an email, sent a headshot. I don't even know what I sent this time. And I think it was literally my boss taking my photo outside of the bar. I think that was my headshot. So then I got an email saying, yes, here's your, no, actually, no, that's not true. They just told me to be somewhere at a certain time. So I drove there again. I think this was another Saturday, And I went to the campus, and I was like, oh God, my nerves, because I was going to have to speak words. I was going to have to say lines. And I'll never forget the anxiety it gave me, but in a way where it was it was energetic anxiety. It was so, because I knew I didn't know what I was doing. And I remember walking up some steps, and there was a guy at a door, and he goes, "Are you here for the auditions?" And I was like, "Yeah." And he goes, well, you're a guy, so here's this. And he gave me the paper. And I remember I walked to the door and I looked through the glass, and there was probably 30, 40 people in the room sitting down. And on the stage was this guy who I later found out was the director. And I remember walking directly into the door. And at this point, my heart is just like, what am I doing? This is insane. And I walked in, and everybody turned around and looked at me. And they were like, "Oh, you're here to audition?" I was like, "Yeah." And I wanted to sit down with everybody else. They were like, "Okay, come straight to stage." I was like, "Huh? What?" And I remember walking right through the sea of people, and I sat down. They were like, "Okay, go." And it was like the worst thing that I could ever do in my entire. And I remember immediately putting the paper down and walking right through the crowd straight to my car and being like, "Nope, this isn't for me." It was the strangest experience for my first audition. And it was humiliating, and it exposed me in so many ways. But then I got a little angry. I was like, that was so humiliating. And that was I felt so out of my element. I felt like I just didn't belong. And that's what clicked in me. I was like, fuck, I don't belong. It's kind of like that attitude. And it was, okay, all right, let's find another one. And the next one I went in, thankfully they gave me the material before, still didn't know what I was doing, but I booked my first little role where I had 3 little lines. And then on Craigslist, oh God, this story could go so many different places. Oh, wow. I'm trying to speed it up. In Atlanta, Georgia, this is important though. In Atlanta, Georgia, they were looking for, on Craigslist, again, before it was creepy, I guess before, maybe it was creepy then, they were doing a casting looking for a photo double for a TV series. And I looked at the photo and I was like, what kind of look like him? And I was like, it doesn't really matter. So I'll send my very professional headshot. So I sent that to Atlanta, which is, a bigger market, I didn't know it's a bigger market, but it's a much bigger city. And I was like, no chance in the world I'm going to get this. And then I got a phone call saying, "Hey, you've been chosen to be the photo double for this movie." So what I'm trying to say is I would just kind of throw a line out there, not really knowing what I was doing, and I'd get a bite. And it was just a constant, and it just kept happening this way. I didn't really know what I was doing. I would throw it and get drawn in a little bit. And this continued. Yeah.
You know what I found interesting at that in that story, that you were looking for castings, right? Did you ever consider to go to an acting school or something like that? Because I think in Germany, people would say, okay, I want to become an actor, so I have to go to an acting school. That's when I started with acting, it was like that. Why did you think about that as well, or was it just not in your mind?
It wasn't in my mind, and I think that probably makes sense why I randomly just explained my school story and how I didn't have a good pass with the schoolings, how I didn't necessarily take teachings well, and if I wasn't completely intrigued by something, that I just didn't really give a shit. You know, although this is something that I obviously care a lot about, but still, maybe that's why it was kind of blocked in my mind. I know for a couple of reasons. One, I couldn't afford it. There's no way I could have afforded it. And at that point in my life, in my late 20s, I had just learned everything by just doing. My brother and I were in a band. And he led the way. Again, as I told you, he's always been the more naturally gifted artist in all aspects. And I was surprised to learn through him that I could actually play a musical instrument as well. That wasn't the trumpet. But how we played music, again, he was a drummer in a high school band and I was a trumpet player. And we learned how to read sheet music. But when it came to guitars and basses and stuff like that, we couldn't tell you what an E note was, but we knew how to tune it, and we knew how to, for whatever reason, just play without knowing what we're doing. So we just did it every single day by doing. So I guess that's kind of what I was applying to this. I was just like, well, I guess I'm just going to, school was just so intimidating for me for so many ways. Maybe I never really thought about it. I never really thought that it was possible. I was like, well, I probably have a better chance just kind of going for it. And again, I didn't know any of the psychology to what it takes to be an actor, what it takes to create character. I didn't know anything, nothing. Yet I was fixated. And I don't know. I don't really know. I even thinking back to this point now, I don't really know how I allowed myself to just go there, honestly. I guess I do, because I would still do the same now. But logically thinking, it made no sense. It made none.
So what kept you going? I mean, there were not all the time castings. We know that.
No, well, once I got into the Atlanta job, it was a pilot. They were shooting a pilot, and I was nothing but a photo double. So I was driving the car. I was walking in a far distant shot with the same clothes on as this guy. It was just for the pilot. And when it got picked up, I didn't do anything between whenever we finished that pilot, which was like, I don't know, it was like 2 or 3 weeks of work. And I would drive there every day. Again, they wouldn't pay you. It's a non-union state, Georgia. So you didn't get union rates, which is a whole nother thing here. You have a country that doesn't get union rates, but that's another story. But you didn't get paid much, and they didn't put you up. You're a non-union photo double or extra or whatever, you're doing there. So I would literally ask my father for days off to work, but I would drive 2.5 hours in the morning and work 12 hours and then drive home. And I did this every day for 2 or 3 weeks. I didn't really know what the motivation was, other than I was just experiencing something new. Looking back at it now, what I'm addicted to is new experiences that intrigue me. That's something that drives me strongly. And this is what this was. Financially, I was making nothing. And of course, you'd have to wait 3 months, 4 months before they send you a paycheck anyway. So, but anyway, after we finished this pilot, I think it was like 6 or 7 months later, which I didn't do anything because I was searching, but I didn't know what to do. I think maybe I went for a few more student film auditions. And I think I actually did a couple, now that I'm thinking about it, like these little short scramble films that I actually think I played a waiter once. Anyway, I got a phone call from the production again saying that they want to hire me for the show got picked up.
Mm-hmm.
So they wanted to not only use me as a photo double, but as a stand-in for this actor. And I was like, yes. So again, for I don't know how many months, I drove to Atlanta every single day and was working even longer hours and never sleeping. Sometimes I'd sleep in my car in a Walmart parking lot. And I would do this every single day, like a crazy person. But I was addicted to being on set.
Mm-hmm.
I thought that I really wanted to be an actor. That was my I want to be in your shoes, bro. I want to be I'm going to be an actor. And fast forward really quickly before I come back, what I realize now is I'm more addicted to the process. I'm more addicted to the creating part than I am being an actor. But then the nucleus of what I was doing is I wanted to be an actor. I wanted to be something my parents and family were proud of and walk down a red carpet one day. And, I had these little ridiculous, ambitions in the beginning. Thankfully, those quickly evaporated the further I got down the road because I was more addicted, and I realize that now, I was more addicted just to being on set, just being a small little fraction of this creative process. It was so fulfilling to me. And I was very attentive. Now, this is going to sound very, this is where my ego is going to kick in a little bit. I'm going to allow my ego to speak for a moment.
Yes, please.
Just for storytelling purposes, okay? So you're up, ego. I kind of built a reputation of being a good stand-in because I was so tuned in. I was always there. I was always attentive. I didn't have to take a lot of direction because I was tuned into the actors. I was focused on the mechanics of it. And I was a good boy. They were like, you're a good stand. We don't have to look for you. And we're yelling for second team. And just because I was, again, it goes back to school. When I'm interested, I am in it. I'm in it. And I became a wanted stand-in. So I started getting, so other casting directors were getting kind of this word out. And fast forward a little bit, I think I did another movie called, I did a couple of movies called Wanderlust with Paul Rudd and a couple other people. Anyway, that was actually after LA, now that I'm thinking about it. So the show got picked up for a second season. Okay. And at this point, I'd started doing a few more student films, and I was getting day player roles. I worked on a movie called We Are Marshall right after this October Road show. It was with Mathew McConaughey and Matthew Fox and all these other people. And I'll never, ever, ever for the rest of my life forget a moment I had on the set of We Are Marshall. And this was my second stand-in gig anyway. And just a few months prior to that, I was working at a bar and at my dad's auto, mechanic shop. And here I am standing on a mark, who I was standing in for Matthew Fox, who was running late to come to set at that moment. And Mathew McConaughey was on set, and it was a scene with him. And this was one of the most defining moments that I'd ever had, that I've ever had. So I was standing on Matthew's mark, and the other stand-in his name is Justice Leak, who is now a very successful actor himself back in the States. He was standing in for McConaughey. And McConaughey, very method actor, McConaughey. We called him Coach. We didn't call him anything but that. So he was already on set. Fox wasn't here yet. And I was sending him my thing, and he come to Justice, and he tapped him on the shoulder, so Justice tapped out, and Matthew stepped on his mark. And he's just, it was a very intense moment. And this is when I knew, this is the moment I knew, because it was a very intense moment between the two characters. This is when the two coaches were arguing each other pretty intensely. And I could feel, I didn't realize it then, but I could feel McConaughey's energy in that moment. And that's why he just wanted to be on the mark, because he was angry, he was mad, he was just standing there focused. And for whatever reason, I tuned into it. Mm-hmm. So he was looking at me like he was just about to rip my throat out. And I don't know what happened, but I just tuned right into it. And I was like, and I was looking at him without saying anything, but I was basically saying with my eyes, yeah, fuck you too, man. You know, it was like that. And we just tuned in I remember it was so eerie. And I remember the other people started talking about it, and they were asking me later, like, what happened? And we were just staring at each other so intensely until Fox got there and they got out. But Matthew just locked eyes with me and didn't break it. And I just looked at him back, and we just, I don't know how long it was, but we just looked at each other like we were just about to like go at it, like brawl. And I walked away. I was like, what the fuck just happened? You know? But it was that moment of like, God, like you couldn't stick me in more of a situation, not knowing what I'm doing, but somehow I snapped into it. Mm-hmm. And it was nothing but a staring contest. But I was like, I didn't cower. Are you kidding me? Like afterwards, I was like, what the fuck am I doing? Like what was I doing? Like that was, what am I trying to get fired? Like what was I just doing? You know, I questioned a lot afterwards. I was like, he wasn't Matthew McConaughey in that moment. It was just like more about, I don't know. It's a weird thing. But anyway, after that production, I was still doing like, the hard way. I was looking for stand-in jobs. I was looking for extra jobs. I was looking for student film things. And I'd come to a point at that point where I was getting ready to, because I'd met some friends who lived in Atlanta, obviously, because I was working on sets every day. I was like, I think I just need to move to Atlanta. I think I just need to move here. So I started looking into what I could potentially do. At that point, I was pretty confident, though, that I could get enough like extra and stand-in jobs to make it just the same amount of money, if not more, than I was working 2 jobs in Alabama, which is sad. It's not much. From either way, it's not much. So I was kind of pretty intensely looking into moving to Atlanta. And one of my friends, his name is Wes Cummings, I asked him, I was like, dude, can you help me? Like, I think, and he was also, I met him by working on the television series. He was a stand-in as well for that and an aspiring actor. And I was like, dude, I want to move to Atlanta. Do you have any advice for me? Or do you know possibly I could like get a place? And he goes, well, I'm moving to LA. You want to come there? And I was like, you're moving to LA? He goes, yeah, they picked up second season of October Road, but they're shooting it in LA. And I was like, huh, okay, let's go to LA. So I went to my dad. Oh, God. I went to my dad, who was always really great. Like, he allowed me time off work to toy around with these, I don't know. But at the same time, again, like coming from a small town, even like being an extra brought a lot of ego padding attention, which in the beginning was fuel. I'm not gonna lie. It was good. Like, yeah, okay, cool. I'm doing something like different. But I remember coming to him one day when we were at lunch, and I was like, Dad, I got to talk about something. I was like, I'm moving to LA. And he goes, what? I was like, I want to move to Los Angeles, California. He goes, you've never even been past Louisiana. I was like, I know. He goes, what are you going to do? He says, you're really going to go for this acting thing? Like, and then I told him, I was like, Dad, it's the only thing that really makes me feel good. And so many things happened in that one little moment sitting at that diner where my father, I guess, heard for the first time that his life wasn't good enough for me. And I could feel that. He was hurt. He was hurt. And he was also worried. He knew that just as I knew, I had no business chasing that silly dream. I knew that. Probably that's what drove me harder, because I told you I have a very competitive nature about me. That's why I love sports. Mm-hmm. So when I'm told or I feel I can't do something, that's when I want to do it even more. And I had no business. I had no business chasing that crazy thing. And even he, for the first time, he's like, what are you doing? This is crazy. This is like crazy. I was like, I know it's crazy, but I have to do it because I can't. But it was one of those moments where we weren't arguing, but it was kind of intense, because it was that moment where he was telling me how unwise this was, how it wasn't smart. You're going to get yourself into a lot of bad situations. And this is where my anger, my competitive nature kicks up. And I kind of probably said it harshly. I was like, Dad, I don't want to be like you. I don't want to be working my whole life, hard labor, being broke on Mondays. And if I could ever go back in my life and take that away, I would take it away, because I could tell that just gutted him. But I had to do it. I feel like that had to happen, because I had to snap that restriction that I had in myself as well, as long as with other people. Now, fast forward into the future, my dad and I laugh about that conversation, and he admits how that hurt, and he admits how insane that he thought his son was, and how I definitely was, but how that was probably the most wisest thing I've ever done. And it took a lot of ego. It took a lot of courage to make that moment. But, so I moved to Los Angeles, and I'm really not trying to drag on the story, but the ironic thing about moving to Los Angeles, and I'm really going to try to speed this up because there's so much to say in this thing. The moment that we moved there, we got a place. I took all the savings that I had. I sold my car. I took everything that I had to move into this flat with this other couple, because he was moving there with his girlfriend who didn't work in the business at all. Mm. So I was going to rent one of the rooms out in North Hollywood. And I remember driving across country, again, never having been past Louisiana. It was such a Hollywood moment of literally driving from Alabama to Los Angeles to chase being an actor. Like really this slingshot into the abyss, try to do this. And I remember the moment that we got there, and this is where ignorance comes into play. I was told that, of course, if you want to come to LA, you can work on this production. We loved having you on set. The second AD and the first AD told me this. So we moved there, anticipating having a job, working in Hollywood, actually in Hollywood this time, but swiftly learning that this is a union state, and I am not a part of the union. Mm. What's union? What is the Screen Actors Guild? What does this mean? Oh, this means that you don't actually have this job and you can't work it. So we didn't get to work on the second season, because we weren't a part of the Screen Actors Guild, because they hired stand-ins and a very small margin of extras in the union, because that's part of the thing. I didn't know what the fuck a union was. I didn't know what the Screen Actors Guild was. I didn't know any of this stuff. And I don't know what the first ADs were thinking. I guess they just knew that, or figured that I did. That is calculated into the story. So here we are sitting in Los Angeles like, oh, fuck, my dad was right. Now what? So I went right back to doing what I did back home. I got on Craigslist. Mm. And I found through a casting director who is an extras casting director on the pilot of the first TV show that I did. She was actually from LA. She didn't work on the actual shooting of the season, but she did the pilot. She's the one that found me on the Craigslist. Mm-hmm. She was out in California, and I found another Craigslist posting of her, by her. And they were looking for this was for a movie, a young Ray Liotta person, someone who can portray a young Ray Liotta. Mm-hmm. And I was like, Ray Liotta, I guess I kind of look like him. It was another one of those things where like, I guess so. So I took my headshot, was a little more evolved because my friend West is like, no, we got to get you, my girlfriend's a photographer, so we can get you like, a better headshot. So I took this now professional headshot that I had, and I sent it to her without knowing it was her at first. She responded back, and I was like, oh, wow, this is cool. This is you. You're here. This is weird. She goes, yeah, cool. I'm going to send your headshot to production. I was like, okay, cool. And I got it. Not only did I get it, it was a flashback scene where I was playing a young Ray Liotta. Mm-hmm. They tapped Hartley. I got SAG eligibility from this. They took me to set. I had a trailer with my name on it. I didn't know what the hell was going on. I just moved to Los Angeles. And here I was playing a young version of Ray Liotta in a movie called Powder Blue. It was just one shooting day where I had to climb up these really sketchy stairs, these fire escape stairs. And this is a moment where the character sees the love of his life for the first time. He's explaining this to his daughter, who he just got out of prison, how he met her mother. And he was working in he's working for these like gangs or whatever. I think this was supposed to be in New York. And I didn't get the script, so I didn't really know what was happening. I was just told that I needed to climb up these steps, and I had blood on my hands because I just did something, and I'm eating an orange because I'm hiding for something. And I look across the window, and I fall in love with this girl who is in her apartment. And it was so bizarre. So I went from like all that to like being directed by this real director. And of course, I never met Ray, and it was one day of shooting, and I become SAG eligible, like just like that. I was like, okay, so all right, and I still had no clue what I was doing. And now I can speed up the process. So I got my Screen Actors Guild card really quickly. I started booking and this was very beneficial because I started doing a lot of extra work in Los Angeles, and I didn't have to do it on the non-union side because I was now Screen Actors Guild. I could do it on the union side, which paid me more money and paid me a lot more efficiently. So it was a nice little step up. So I did that for a few months, and then the writer's strike hit, the 2008 writer's strike. It hit I think almost immediately, and it shut down everything. And then I was working at Pier 1 at a furniture store and selling furniture to random celebrities and all this other crazy stuff. So eventually I decided to move back to Atlanta. And then that's where things really took off because I had already built some kind of foundation in Atlanta, went to LA, and then moved back with a little bit more experience. And then that's when stuff started rolling in. Like these cast directors, I'm gonna let my ego speak for a minute. These cast directors were reaching out to me and say, hey, can you stand in for Colin Farrell? Hey, can you stand in for Robert De Niro? Oh, Robert De Niro really liked working with you. Can you work with him on this film? Okay, great. Now can you stand in for Michael Douglas? Can you stand in for Colin Firth? Can you stand in for Kevin Bacon? And I was just boom, 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 boom. And I was just working like crazy. And I was standing in. And not only standing in with these people, like for instance, De Niro, like I got to work with him. Mm-hmm. He liked to talk to me about the blocking. Mm-hmm. Oh, what happened here? Did you change anything? He was just so interactive. And this was becoming my education because I was watching their process. I was watching De Niro particularly because De Niro would do the most fascinating thing. When he would take on a role, particularly this film that we were working on with John Travolta and himself. He was playing a veteran, a guy from the South who used to be in the military in some facet. But I was so fascinated on how Bob would do that. He would he would reach out to the local casting directors and say, hey, can you find me someone who is not an actor, but who is somebody who is available to just be with me every single day on set, who is from this area or from a particular area where his character is from and has a similar background, and just be with me every single day. And we just sit in my trailer in the mornings and we just read my script. It cannot be an actor. It has to be like a genuine person. And it was so fascinating for me, because I was like, that's so genius. Like, he finds someone who's very close to this real character, and he just talks to him every morning. Mm-hmm. And he just maybe reads a couple of lines from him. And there's this, he mimics like the personality traits or whatever. And I'm like, oh, that's so, I would just get so giddy and excited, you know, and a few times I got to talk to him about that. And then being on the set with Colin Farrell, who's another awesome person to work with, and who was very, of course, there were a lot of actors that wasn't so pleasant to work with, but I don't talk about those people. I talk about the positive ones. But again, I was on set with Colin Farrell and Sir Anthony Hopkins. Like, I kept getting put on this plate of creatives and inspirational moments that I was like, what's happening here? You know, what's going on? But I'd always listen to one of the things that Mr. Hopkins would always inspire me so much is just hearing him on set, just talking to people and his energy. And he would just talk to people about the most random thing. And he would talk about how he had coffee in the morning and this happened with so much energetic energy. And I'm like, oh my God, like that's me. Of course, I'm not a fucking Anthony Hopkins. I'm not anywhere in his realm, but there's some similarities there. I started feeling my kind. I started feeling these tribal instincts that I kind of had.
But what did you learn from these people for your own acting? What was maybe the one or two most important things for you?
Being able to be a stand-in so much as I was, and being able to, it was like the perfect witness spot. Like, if you ever really just wanted to be set inside something, there's nothing better than being a stand-in if you truly wanted to learn the mechanics of production. Because I was, again, we keep talking about this witness, but I was a witness. I was an implanted witness to how this works from within. And what the thing that I took mostly is how there were so many different ways to do this. Everybody had their own. But what I was learning by vicariously experiencing others do this work was what felt more intimate to me, what felt more inspiring and intriguing to me. And I learned something, oh God, I feel like I'm name dropping at this point. But this person told me this, and this person told me this, and blah, 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 blah. I always have to throw up a little in my mouth as my ego comes up to want to play. But Niro and Hopkins probably taught me, well, different people taught me different things. But when you talk about actually becoming an actor, those two individuals shed some light on what it really is. Mr. Hopkins, Tony, whatever you want to name drop what the people close in his circle call him, and same thing with Bob, actually. But he really showed me that, of course, never going to like any acting classes well, it's not true. I took a couple acting classes through some friends who were doing acting classes in LA, but it was good for more technical how to audition stuff, which was really good. But again, in my very ignorant mind of you have to learn the lines, be ready to say your lines when this person says this word, it's my cue to go. You know, for me, that was acting, right? What I learned by these two individuals, and particularly with Mr. Hopkins, is like, he goes, the lines don't mean shit. damn thing. It is not about that.
Mm.
It doesn't fucking, I read the script in the beginning. I read the script right before production. And that morning, I'll read my scene. I won't touch it again until then. But again, everybody has different processes. Everybody has different ways to do it. This particular way. And he goes, I don't care what my lines are. It's what the other person is saying to me. It's that moment when we're not talking. It's that space in between. And I was just like a little kid. I was like, tell me more. Because it was this process. And I'm like, oh my God, there's so many levels to this. And I was just like, I just kept getting more intrigued, more deeper down the spiral or up the spiral. I don't know which way I was going. It doesn't matter. But, and then watching De Niro, he would be doing a scene and he would be holding something like these, for instance, and he would be doing his lines, but he would be so like into like fidgeting and playing, and every now and then looking up and connecting and then disconnecting and focus here. And there was so much realness in that. There was this space that was being created where he's not doing a scene with the actor. He's doing the scene with this table. He's doing the scene with this room. He's doing the scene with this egg that he's holding. You could feel him working with everything in his surroundings. And I was like, oh, that's so. And again, it was these things as I was extracting from these masters. That's what it felt like. It felt like I won some kind of lottery and got put next to masters, and I just got to extract information, like this hidden like beauty and stuff and this was my education. Mm-hmm. This ended up being my spontaneous, education.
How did you discover your own way of acting then?
By failing a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Getting a lot of no's, getting a lot of feelings that, I'm never going to do this, because I got really lucky. Again, I can't tell you how fortunate I am, how lucky I am, just absolutely ridiculously lucky. I wanted to get, this is so stupid. I didn't explain this fully. When I decided to move back from LA to Atlanta, I didn't really know that I was going to move back. I knew that I was kind of not doing anything anymore. Like all the roads kind of dried up and stopped because of this writer strike. It kind of changed like the atmosphere of everything that was kind of happening, even though a lot of stuff was positive. I was starting to really struggle financially. You're talking about really expensive to live in Los Angeles. And I was working at a part-time at a furniture store in a yogurt shop. That's what I was doing to make ends meet, which were really hard to make those ends meet. So I went back home for my cousin's wedding, and I wanted to poke around a little bit in Atlanta a little bit more. And I was like, I need an agent, like a real acting agent. How do I do that? I have nothing. I've been a stand-in and an extra. I think I've done a couple of scramble short films. Like I have nothing. So what did I do? I made this really, again, I got really lucky. One of the producers and writers of the show October Road, his name is Scott Rosenberg. He wrote a lot of great films as a ghostwriter and a screenplay writer. He was, and still is, just such a authentic, warm human being. So I wrote because I worked on the production and had his email address. Actually, I think I did this on Facebook. Oh shit, I did do this on Facebook. I wrote him a message randomly and said, hey, I want to get an agent potentially in Atlanta, Georgia. Sorry, this is not true. This happened while I was in LA. When I was in LA, I wanted to get an agent. And I wrote Scott And I asked Scott, I was like, hey, I need to get an agent. Sorry, I had to refresh my memory. I was like, actually, it didn't happen that way at all. So I was in LA and I asked Scott, I need an agent. Can you possibly maybe write me a letter of recommendation? You know, and he's never seen me act. He's never seen me do anything. And I got an email saying, yes, I'll write you a letter of recommendation. And he sent it in the mail, like an official letter of recommendation vouching for me as an actor. That's just how amazing he was. And he'd never seen, but he'd seen me work, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
He'd seen me daily, I guess, dedicate myself.
Yeah.
He'd never seen me. So assuming that he wasn't just handing out flyers of, well, maybe there was something there. I don't know. I took this paper and started sending it all over LA to agencies. Literally, Wilhelmina, one of the top agencies in LA, invited me to come in for an interview. And I was like, I looked at the actor sheet who was on there, and I'm like, no. What? I have a meeting with these guys? So I drove there. I remember driving to the office, and I got to the parking lot, and I didn't go in. I didn't walk through the door. I ended up turning around and driving home.
Why?
Because I knew this wasn't the way. I had no business going from never really doing anything, from walking in the door of one of the top agencies in the world and having a sit-down meeting with them. And I was like, Jeff, what are you going to tell them? That you met a great producer and the only reason I'm here is they're doing the producer like a favor by seeing me? But what am I going to sell? I haven't done anything. I just knew in the parking lot that I wasn't ready. You know, we talked about this with you, with your mom.
Yes, yeah.
I wasn't ready. And even though I was so excited and like, are you kidding me? I can go get an agent with blah, 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 blah. I thought I let fear beat me. I really thought for a long time that I let fear overcome me. But that wasn't what happened. I just knew that wasn't the way, even though I had a golden ticket in my hand. Like Willy Wonka. Why do we keep circling around to these same analogies? Like the Willy Wonka, I had a golden ticket to get into the factory, at least. But I just knew that it wasn't right. It wasn't meant to be. So I just went back home, and I got a few more emails from other nowhere near close to this agency, but I just didn't follow through. I don't know. I just didn't follow through. And then of course the writer's strike hit and shut everything down. Okay, so fast forward to Atlanta. So while I was in Atlanta at home, this is also a really good story. I'm glad we're telling you. Oh, this is so good. So I was home, still had all my stuff in LA. Went to my cousin's wedding, and then I wanted to go to Atlanta. And I was like, oh, what if I try to get an agency here? I'm going to do the same thing I did in LA. I'm going to take this golden ticket. I'm going to send it out to I actually sent it to one. Actually, I sent it to the biggest agency that I knew of in Atlanta, and I sent it to them, and because they were doing open calls, and I think they had just closed the open calls before mine went through, but because I had a recommendation from Scott Rosenberg, it got pushed through, and I always wrote on the outside of the envelope from this is from Scott Rosenberg. You know, always use that ticket to like at least get somebody to peer into the envelope, because I'd heard the nightmares of like looking at it and throwing it right in the trash. So I'd learned little tricks to make sure people at least open the envelope. So I got invited to come read for the agents, and this was another very important place in my journey. So I drove to Atlanta. I remember being incredibly nervous, and I walked into the agency. I walked in the door this time for the first time, and I met everyone. I met the commercial agent, the theater agent. I mean the theatrical agent, the vice president, the president, like everybody was there. It's like this table. It's like a table. Another experience, went back to my very first audition, kind of that same experience, but these were all agents. And I remember sitting at the end of the table, and I was just in a different, something was just different. I don't know what it was, but something was just different energetically. And they slid it. It was all cold reads back then. There was no preparation. They just slid you a piece of paper. And I read this with one of the agents. And I remember just not caring. I got to a moment I just didn't care in a good way. I was just like, I'm just going to have fun with this. So we did. And I just remember when I don't care, when I'm very relaxed, one of my qualities as a human is I like making people laugh. I love making people laugh. One of my favorite things is bringing the energy into this very comical space. So I was doing that a lot, and especially in the reading and especially in the whatever. And I remember there was other people there that were there reading as well. And we all waited after we each went in there and read, we waited in the space sitting area. And they came out, one of the assistants came out after we were all sitting there, and they told us all at the same time, they're like, okay, you might hear from us in like 2 or 3 weeks. If you hear from us at all, you'll hear from us in 2 or 3 weeks. And I was like, okay, well, that was fun. It doesn't matter. So I got in my truck and I started driving home, and I got probably 30 minutes down the road and my phone rings. And it was the agency saying they wanted to sign me, literally 30 minutes down the road. So I had that moment of getting the phone call saying, we want to sign you as an actor. And I went through this threshold of like not knowing what I'm doing to like, oh my God, I'm doing this. I'm doing this. And they told me it would take 3 weeks to everybody, and they called me 30 minutes down the road. So that's like, for me, that was like really like special. And I was like, that's it. I'm not going back to LA. So I didn't. I found a place to live there, and got an agent and started doing lots and lots and lots and lots of auditions. This is a very long way to answer your question. I failed a lot. They were sending me out on all kind of things, and I was just, but I was learning each time. I was learning how to audition. I was learning how to prepare, and I was just getting a lot of no's. But it wasn't about the no's. I was doing something. Everything was a step. Everything was a level. Everything was, for me, I was already succeeding that I had a real acting agent, that I was going up for auditions. And like, I'd gotten to this point in this very unorthodox way, I guess, because I never even considered schooling or whatever due to other things. So, and I'm quickly going to fast forward a few years because I hadn't been getting anything. I think I got a couple of day role stuff. And I was still doing stand-in work in that time. I was still standing in for productions while auditioning for, a lot of times I would audition for a production I was already standing in on, which is weird. But I remember getting to a frustrating point because I was trying so hard. And I remember being with who eventually ended up being my wife. We were going to a wedding in Athens, Georgia. And this is very vital. What I'm about to say is very vital because I found my magic. I kept discovering what works in my process. So we were at this wedding, so we had to stay in this hotel room, and I get another audition from this movie that was shooting in Atlanta. And it was a horror film with Samuel L. Jackson and John Cusack. And I remember getting the audition, and I was just so burnt out of getting all these opportunities and not booking anything ever. And I remember getting in this space where like, do I even do this audition? You know, I'm here having fun with my, at the time, girlfriend whatever. And like, I'm supposed to do this while I'm here. Like I had this short period. They always give you like quickly short auditions. Here's your audition. You have 2 days to do it, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, I'm in Athens, Georgia. I have to do it in the hotel room. But I remember getting in this space where I just didn't sort of care. Again, back to the I don't care.
Mm-hmm.
And they had all these directions, these very specific directions where I was always told, especially in some of the classes that I took in LA, it says you have to follow directions, you have to read everything, you have to read between the lines, you have to do all this stuff. I was like, oh, fuck all that shit. I don't care. I'm going to do this. So I sit down in a corner. You had to stand up and you had to do all these, because this character became this like zombie thing, and you had to do all these ridiculous things and then very specifically in directions. And I was like, I'm not doing any of that shit. I don't even know if I want to do this. Oh, fuck it. I'm going to do it, but I'm just going to do it. I don't care. So my girlfriend taped it. I just did it my way. I didn't give a fuck about it. Sent it. And I got a call back. I'd gotten callbacks before. And again, I took that energy of like, this is just going to be another fucking tease. This is just going to piss me off. I'm just going to like, you're going to dangle it right in front of me. And go, no. So I was a little, again, as I told you, when I get the competitive nature in me gets a little angry. I get a little angry. I get a little fuck you-ish. And I didn't so much care. So there was very specific directions to go into the callback, because the director was in there, the producers were there, and the reader was there. And I remember, this is crazy. I remember walking into the room. And again, there's very specific details on how to do this audition. The reader has the camera pointed up at the mark, standing up in the middle of the room, corners on each side. There's a table here. The director's there, whatever. I walked in. Usually I would walk in and you're just like, hi, I'm Jeffrey. Nice to meet you, blah, blah, blah. I walked in. I didn't say a fucking word to anyone. I walked right through the room. I walked right past the mark, and I sat down in the corner. Just crunched down in the corner like this. And I didn't know what I was doing. It was almost like I was in a trance. But I sat down in the corner, and they just looked at me. And the reader looked at me, and he had the camera facing at the mark. And he kind of he didn't say anything, but he kind of hinted toward the mark. And I just kept looking at him like this. And then he turned back around to what ended up being the producers and the director. And they were just like, roll. So he readjusted the camera into the corner, and I just did my scene. I just didn't do anything. I just went right into the lines and into the things. And as soon as I was done, I stood up and I walked out the fucking door, and I didn't say a fucking thing to anyone. I didn't say anything to anyone. And I remember just having this, it was a weird kind of energy. It was angry, and I was just, fuck you, I'm going to allow myself to be creative in a strange little weird way. And I remember thinking, I think I just committed career suicide. I think I just killed my acting career and forever. They're going to call my agent and say, never fucking send this guy and another casting director again. I got in my car and was driving home, and I got a call from my agent, and I didn't get to my house. And they said that I booked the role. And again, it was that space of like failing a lot, trying to follow direction, trying to find my own space, and getting to this point where I had to have a little bit of fuck you mentality, but not in this arrogant way, just in this like frustrated, I don't know. I wasn't trying to be a dick. I was just overwhelmed in this kind of energy of not really finding my space. And when I just didn't give a fuck, there's the magic. Again, I kept finding the magic in that space. But I also immediately, when I booked the job, I went to everybody, I was like, I am so sorry. I did not mean to be an asshole. I don't know what's ever coming. I remember producer telling me, he goes, no, that was fucking brilliant.
Yeah.
He goes, that was brilliant. Mm-hmm. And I was just like, I don't pretend I know what I was doing. I don't know what I was doing. Mm-hmm. But, and of course, I also intuitively knew that I can't do every audition that way. I can't. But in that very specific moment, the specific character that I was portraying, the specific storyline of whatever, it just worked. And I just allowed myself to like be spontaneously, intuitively creative in that moment and just be that in the context of the material that was there. And that's what happened. So I got killed by Samuel L. Jackson in my first big movie. So it ended up being a very shorter scene in the end, but still, like, I kept finding my space. I'm dragging these stories out. I'm sorry.
No, it's just, there is so much in everything you said. I just kept you going because I thought, I mean, I started taking notes now because I wanted to say so much, but I thought, no, it's so interesting. Keep going. And I don't know where to start.
I don't know where to stop. That's my problem.
Okay, I'm going to look at my notes now. No, what you last said with the take your own space, I think this is so important. And maybe you didn't realize that at that moment in the audition, but you went in there and in the corner, and that was your space. And all of a sudden, the room was your space, I think.
Yeah.
Because the other way around would be you walk in there, and these people are like the superpower, and we always hold ourselves back. And then they have the space, but you have to go in there and take your space. And that's what you did. Well,
see, and this is why I said it took so many failures to realize that. I went into so many rooms, and I went into so many rooms and hit their mark and did this thing. And like it took so many no's and failures to not become this arrogant asshole. But in this particular, again, like if this wasn't the character, if this wasn't the scene, I never would have done that. But I kind of let go of that anxiety of I need to get this job to like, dude, treat this as the job, treat this as the work, treat this as the character. And again, I don't know where this came from. I think it was just a lot of extracting information from other little bitty points. It's almost like we keep circling to all these beautiful analogies, but I was getting these puzzle pieces.
Yes.
I started to slowly put it together.
But it's also, it's like you followed your intuition and what was there at that moment. Because I think it happens too often that people do what they think what they have to do in that moment. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So.
And I have to admit, and this, oh God, I always have to never fails. I always have to put my ego in check when I say this. But it took that was a dangerous move, if you think about it. It literally had to line up right for that to work as well. It's not like you can go in every audition and be this special actor and try to take over the room that way. Certain things just have to be in place, you know? Because I have booked a lot of jobs since then where I hit my mark, not being this pretentious asshole.
Sure. Okay. But it's about the feeling inside, and
right.
You know, yeah.
This intuitive feeling is exactly. Yeah. This intuitive spot, yes.
Yeah, and maybe also for the castings afterwards, it changed. I don't know, but maybe it changed something inside of yourself.
Yeah. It's okay. I'm just going to briefly say this because I feel like that since we're going to do a series, there's going to be more. There's another whole half to talk about. Way too much, but just really quickly to kind of wrap this part up before we talk about the other stuff. It was in this weird moment. I told you I was with who was about to be my wife and about to become pregnant. I started booking. After that, I did start booking. I started filling my space a little bit. And my agent had put so many years into me already, knowing that I was kind of like a raw product, but they saw some kind of potential there, obviously. God, sorry. But again, another suicide moment. I started booking, and then my then newly wife became pregnant, and I was like, let's move to Germany. You want to move to Germany? Let's move to Germany. And my agent's like, what? We just spent so many years. You just started booking. You just started studying. You're just going to move to Europe? And I'm like, yeah. Just so weird. I spent so much energy and so much time and so much process, and I hit my stride, and then I just left. But that's another story. We'll stop at that point. But anyway.
Okay. Maybe we stop at that point.
No, we don't have to stop. I'm just saying maybe we stop.
No, for today, for this episode, maybe. But because I think this story was already so inspiring, and I think I want to sum this a bit up.
Okay. Yeah.
When you were telling this story, I thought I always have my listeners in my mind, or my clients sometimes. Mm-hmm. And I can feel what some of them think. And I think a lot of them would say, yeah, well, he was lucky because there was this and that moment. And then, your whole story could be like one of these stories where people say, yeah, okay, that it just happened. But the thing was, what I think is you took these moments, and it's like, I spoke a lot this year about surrendering. Like these moments in life that just happen and you follow them. Or they just appear and you follow them, like the audition, your first audition for I forgot the name, for the extra.
Oh yeah.
The very first, where you felt this exciting excitement for the acting, and I think that's it, because a lot of people don't realize these kind of moments and don't follow them because they think, no, I can't do this.
You're absolutely right, and in each level of this story, this journey that I took on, it was in these surrendering moments where it happened.
Yes.
And there was a lot of process of, was I lucky? Was I fortunate? Absolutely, I've been lucky. But there's been a lot of process in that. A lot of, I'm not going to pretend that everything was easy.
But I think luck happens when you surrender.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It doesn't happen when you wait. It happens when you go for what appears in front of you, even if you're afraid. I mean, that's what's happening in my life now, because I did a lot of surrendering this year, and now it feels like magic happening, but there was a lot of work behind that.
Yeah, a lot
of letting go, really.
And there's a lot of other ingredients, I think, as well, in my own particular case. Like, I think a lot of things, as I mentioned many times in these moments, a lot of these ingredients came to be one recipe. Like, for instance, it takes a certain kind of stubbornness to, like, not let the failure beat you down. It takes this. Guess who gets you through that? Guess who gets you through that? Your ego. Your ego is a vital tool in being your driver through this.
That's so true. Yes.
The selfishness that you need, the stubbornness that you need ego to get through that. And then it all comes also to me being a rebel, like getting angry when I am either told or shown that I can't do something. My competitive nature comes up and I'm like, yes, I can. And it's like all these things have to like come together. The surrender, the ego playing a part, the selfishness playing a part, the letting go, the surrender,
that's what I also thought about all these no's. This rebel inside of you, I think that is so important. And I think a lot of people think that is something bad, being a rebel. But why? Because I told you I did casting. And there are so many people who hear a no, and then they are holding themselves back even more because they got rejected. And another time, and every time it hurts, and then one day they think they're not worth it. And this downward spiral is so dangerous because you have to take this no and make something out of it, or feel what happens inside of you. Like you feel it, and then there comes the rebel out of you. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I definitely know what you mean.
Yeah. So I think that was something good for you because, yeah, as I said, there are too many people that take this no and think even more that they are not good enough.
You know, it kind of funnels all the way back down to this rebel, to this stubbornness, to this dreamer syndrome that I have of when I watched Superman for the first time, put on my pajama uniforms and walked up to my bunk bed and literally jumped off headfirst into the toy box. That's kind of how I do everything. That's kind of how I do my life. I jump head first into the toy box and just go for it. It's, you know, and I'm realizing that now in this conversation, you know, I regurgitating this story and this journey, you know, it's so enlightening. And I get so much, I'm like, wow, you know, again, I'm fortunate to be conscious of this. I'm fortunate to have experienced this. I'm fortunate for everything about it, you know.
What I also really liked was the moment when you said in LA, when you stood in front of that agency door and didn't go in, because I can feel this regret, or also this thinking of, was I stupid not going in there? Mm-hmm. This is so much about the moment. No, it's trust versus regret. Do I regret that I didn't go in, or do I trust that it wasn't the time yet?
Yeah.
I think we should stop regretting things or chances we didn't take, but trust that there will be another chance, or that it wasn't the time yet. Also trust to our own feelings, our own behavior.
Yeah, and that's such a tricky space, because it can be so deceiving. Is it did you succumb to anxiety and didn't take your shot? Because there are certain times that, like for instance, that audition, sometimes you just gotta like wave off all the anxiety and just fucking go for it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But sometimes it's such a delicate thing, you know. It's like, how did I know that wasn't the time to take the shot? And I'm not going to pretend that I walked away going, now's not the time, I'm so enlightened. No, it wasn't that at all. I was confused. I was confused for a long time. I was questioning myself for many, many months. Why didn't I do that? What was I scared? Did I finally crumble? Is this, you know, I have a habit of really being, as I told you before, and this goes with everything that I do in art and everything, I'm very critical of myself, but not in a way where I beat myself down, but I really try to dissect myself as much as possible. Mm-hmm. And so I don't mind living in my head with all of these feelings and trying to analyze what they are, what they mean. And over time, I was like, it's just, yeah, of course I didn't do it. Yeah, I don't regret not. Are you kidding me? To this day, I still don't regret, because I get a little bit of fear. I can feel, when I think about that moment, I go back to that fear of knowing, would that have been the moment when they laughed at me because I had nothing, that just literally turned it off for me? Could that have been that? Because it could have. Mm-hmm. I could have like had this golden ticket and walk in there and them just like, really, dude, like we did this for Scott's favor, but come on, what are you doing? You know? Well, again, I don't know, but this is the dialogue I have with myself. But over time, I just realized that, yeah, I'm so glad you didn't walk through those doors. And sometimes you're proud of yourself for pushing through that threshold of fear and anxiety. And sometimes, as we were talking about the other day, how fear is also your friend.
Yes.
I didn't do it.
Yes, but I think it's a slightly different feeling. I mean, this is really detailed now, but
yes, detailed, yeah.
I think it is a different feeling, and sometimes we don't know it in that moment, but I think the feeling of going through a fear is different than the feeling of I cannot do it.
Right.
It's a different feeling in the body. I also know these moments. I don't have an example right now, but I know these moments standing in front of a door, or sometimes I just can't do it. Even if I tell myself, okay, go through the fear, sometimes it doesn't work. The fear feels different when you should go through it or when you shouldn't do it.
Yeah. This is the detail. But do you know who plays a part in this detail? Intuition. Intuition. That's the ingredients that navigates this fear versus signaling, self-signaling.
Yeah, that's so true. And also, I made a lot of decisions, I think, in the past 1 or 2 years that didn't make sense at all. And I learned that these decisions have been the best because I followed my intuition, even if it made no sense. And later I realized why I had this intuition, because something happened, but I couldn't know this before.
Yeah.
It doesn't make sense sometimes.
No.
When you think with your head, it would have made sense that you walked in that door in Los Angeles.
Yeah.
And maybe, whatever. We
Who
don't
knows?
know. Who knows? Yeah.
They could have made me a project. They could have been like, okay, read this. Okay, you're not ready yet, but if you do this, this, and this, and this, I mean, there's an unlimited amount of things that could have went down.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I'm just very fortunate. I never walked through those doors. It's such a weird thing to say. Very fortunate that I never walked through those doors.
I think that's a good last word for this episode. Again, just thank you for this story.
Well, thank you, because it's an exchange.
Yeah, and also I think that it's also important that, like, this whole story about the stand-in, it's so interesting because I think what made this story good was just that who wants to be a stand-in?
I did.
Yeah, you did, and that's it. You did because you felt that something fascinated you about this. And I think that's the thing. Don't follow the things that you want to be in your head, but follow the things that fascinate you.
Yes.
That's the only thing.
Yes, because had I have gone, okay, I'm not going to be. I'm trying not to be judgmental as I say this, and I'm really not trying to portray anything. So I always give a disclaimer before I hurt. I don't want to. I'm not trying to say anyway. If I'd have went to a drama school, I might have had this. I'm not going to be a stand-in, And I know many, 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 many friends who in the States, whatever, who had this kind of. No, don't allow yourself to be an extra. Don't allow yourself to, just concentrate on your craft. You're an actor. Be an actor. Be an actor. And I just wanted to be. I wanted to be every element of what was happening, and I allowed myself to absorb things that way. Again, back to my rebel nature of not allowing myself to be. School, I'm not trying to say that school is bad. Are you kidding me? Like, when I took my classes in Los Angeles, I learned so many very important techniques that I still use to this day. Absolutely. Absolutely. But I'm very delicate with that. It's allowing yourself to just allowing myself to experience more and not have any judgment. We were talking about judgment. Not having any judgment toward this specific, oh, so you're a stand-in? You're always going to be a stand-in. If they see you as a stand-in, that's what I get a lot too. It's like if producers or writers see you as a stand-in, they're always going to see you as a stand-in. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And they just always felt deaf to my ears. Like they just make, as a creative myself, I never really, I don't feel that way. I don't say, no, no, come on. Like, no, that's not true. Oh, fuck. I have another story. I have too many stories. Remind me the next time to tell you my story with Billy Bob Thornton. It was again one of the most magical moments in this journey. Like, seriously, this was probably close to the top because it was my breaking point. I was ready to throw in the towel, and he sat me down and had a conversation. He was there for me in my weakest point and gave me fuel to keep going. It is a story.
Okay, this is the cliffhanger now for the next episode.
Yeah, the cliffhanger for the next one. Great. I swear we didn't script this. But yeah, we can start with that one. Yeah. So
thank you. It was a pleasure, like always.
Thank you. Seriously, this is such a beautiful process for me to regurgitate this and analyze it again. I love this. I love, and I'll end with this way. Most of it sounded great and wonderful, but I promise you that entire journey, there was more suffrage in there than you can imagine. More suffrage, more failure, more pain. I only touched on the light parts, and that's the last I'll say at this point. But there was a lot of struggle in that time. And I was lucky. And I'm still, with all that being said, I was incredibly lucky. So, yeah.
Amen. Right. It's so funny again because I wanted to do something completely else.
No. Hey, we got to talk about acting though.
We hope you were enjoying this episode as much as we did. Since we are new with our podcast, we'd really appreciate if you give us some feedback on Instagram or Apple Podcast, or recommend us to other people who might also benefit from our conversations and deep talks about life, humanity, consciousness, and the creative industry. Also, make sure you subscribe to our podcast, since there are many more interesting topics to come. And of course, also part 2 of Jeff's journey to Germany, which you shouldn't miss. Thank you so much for listening. See you soon.